Hello, welcome in, baseball fans. We're back for a baseball episode today. I know a lot of you joined us for the softball episode yesterday. I got Jake and AJ joining me. How's it going, fellas?
It's going good. I'm back on the show for a little bit. I know I missed the weekend, and it was an exciting weekend. But glad to be back during the week.
Yeah.
Just smiling through it all, waiting out these rain delays in the SEC tournament. I'm sure the Ags probably won't take the field till close to midnight.
It is going to be a really interesting weekend here with how we got the rest of this week forming up for college baseball. The conference tournaments, we've already seen some conferences make some tough decisions. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. Let's talk about these seeds since we have last weekend to talk about and then what's happened so far in the conference tournament. Let's jump right in. Number one, Tennessee. They took care of business against Mississippi State. They're still number one in the RPI. You guys have any worries about either of them? AJ, you got any worries?
No, I mean, even if they go 2-0 in the SEC tournament, or if, due to rain delays, they make the SEC tournament single elimination, they could lose their first game and they're still going to be the one seed. I mean, there's Virginia Tech coming in behind them has been really good, but there's no one who can, in my opinion, unseat them in the next 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. They're far and away the number one team. They've done everything that we've asked them to be the number one team. The only thing that kind of worries me is kind of that curse of being the number one team. But, I mean, the way Tennessee's played, you have to feel like they're still the favorite going in.
Yeah, I think that they don't care about the curse, hopefully. Hopefully they just come in, they're ready to go, and they want to make it go. I think that they are by far away the number one team. I don't think it's even close. I think that they could lose two, like you guys said. It won't matter. They're going to be the number one seed. Number two, we had Oregon State. They struggled. They lost 4 of the last 6 matches against Arizona and UCLA, who are good ball clubs, but not good enough to make you lose 4 out of 6. They're still number 2 in the RPI. They took care of business on the Saturday game, which was the Sunday game. What do you got, Jake? Do you think that they stay as a national seed? I think that's what they're clawing on for right now.
I think they do, especially kind of how flat Stanford came out in that Arizona State series. That's really the only thing that I'm seeing, just because a lot of these bubble SEC teams are quickly falling. But on the flip side of that, looking ahead, you really have to kind of be wary with how Oregon State's been playing the last couple of weeks. They really haven't had the timely hitting that we've gone accustomed to, and it seems like they almost look lost. And it's a bad time to kind of go bad. But as far as the national seed, they're still going to get a very favorable draw. They'll probably get the Gauchos and somebody else. So it'll be a really interesting kind of regional going out there.
Yeah. Got any thoughts on that one, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations like, yeah, Oregon State's having a rough time, but there are a lot of teams who are also in position for a national seed that aren't doing what they need to do. Like Auburn losing. Like Auburn was trying to fight for a national seed and they might have let it slip, but there's so much fluctuation around there that I think Oregon State has a better chance of being a national seed than any other team outside of Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree. I love my Beavs. I think that their struggles lately have been, due to a few things. They missed Boyd a couple of games in that Arizona series, which was really tough. They're missing Travis Bazana tonight. They're going to throw Jaron Hunter on the dish and on the plate or on the mound tonight. I'm excited for that. But I think if they get one game here in the Pac-12 tournament, I think they're fine for a national seed, even if they don't, because of the way that other teams below them have struggled. Speaking of a team who hasn't struggled, number 3, Virginia Tech. They took care of business against Duke all weekend. They are number 5 still in the RPI. I think that they might get the national 2 seed. What do you think, AJ?
Yeah, I think they're probably right now in the best spot for the 2 seed. If Oregon State runs through and wins the Pac-12 tournament and Virginia Tech, in some weird, the ACC tournament is weirdly structured. So if that bites them a little bit, then they could drop to a 3. But the fact that you could drop to a 3 national seed, and that's the worst thing you can do, is a great spot to be if you're a Hokie.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, with Louisville or the Cardinals behind them. They feel like almost a definite lock coming out and possibly even the 2 seed, just because it seems like every time you're like, okay, they're going to go the wrong way. They're going to streak and, kind of go hold here in a weekend. And then they go out and handle business. Yeah, the ACC structure is a little bit weird, but I feel like they're almost as much of a lock as we thought Oregon State was a couple weeks ago, because they've done everything that we've asked of them. They have the head-to-head over Miami. So I really don't see kind of anything, slacking here with them being a national seed.
Yeah, those are the 3 that I feel most comfortable with so far out of the first 3. Is that those 3 teams really feel like no matter what they do here in the short term with people behind them struggling, I think they're all going to be national seeds. And I think it's just because they put up great numbers all season. They did the things we asked them to do. They won a ton of games. They're all right at that 40-game mark. That's what you have to do if you want to be the national seed, and they all did it. The next one, though, Arkansas, they've dropped to 32 in the RPI. They have struggled against Alabama. They're struggling right now against Alabama. Last I checked, they were still losing that game 4-3. I don't know, Jake. Is Arkansas just not realize that they're playing for a national seed or what?
Yeah, they're almost kind of reminding me of Mississippi State last year, where they seem to kind of go cold every time you count on them to do good. They really are kind of separating themselves away from this national seed, though, and they really are falling. And I know we'll kind of jump into it a little bit later, but it almost seems like A&M's kind of taken Arkansas' spot as the number 2 seed. But looking forward, Arkansas is probably going to have to travel for their regional, and because they just seem to be kind of behind all these SEC teams.
Yeah, and as dumb as it may sound, the committee does look at geography, and it does look like, okay, Arkansas or A&M, because we're kind of trying to fill that one spot in that region, because we're looking at West Coast, and we'll probably have Stanford and Oregon State, depending on how Stanford finishes as a national seed, and then we're swinging out East Coast with Virginia Tech, and so it may very well come down to region placement. I don't see both Arkansas and A&M being national seeds. So I think Arkansas has to figure it out during the tournament to kind of lock it in, because they're stumbling. We thought they were locked to win the West like 3 weeks ago, and they didn't even do that. So
yeah, Arkansas really has surprised me. I really was thinking that they were going to be the 4 seed. I thought that they were going to take care of business against Alabama, come in here, win at least a game in Hoover, and just be like, hey, we're the team that deserves to be a national seed. We've been the same team all year. They're struggling at the wrong time. They're going the wrong direction. And if you're only going to take 2 SEC teams as national seeds, it's probably not going to be Arkansas right now, depending on what A&M does tonight. Speaking of our next team, though, Miami, 2 of 3 against Notre Dame. They look really good in that series. They have to take care of some business in the ACC tournament. But I think they've done enough to stay in the national spotlight, taking care of that Notre Dame series. What do you think, AJ?
I have to agree. Right now, they're beating. They're up on NC State, which would be a good win for them in that tournament. If they just advance out of their pool, I think that does enough to lock them in for a national seed. Otherwise, it's kind of wait and see what other teams do. But I think they're in a great position.
Agreed. I mean, Jake, do you think them getting to the semifinal basically puts them in as a national seed?
Yeah, if they take care of business, and I think that is something that is a very, very easy task for them to do. If they're in that Final Four, semifinal ACC kind of strange pool structure, I think them and Virginia Tech and maybe even one of those other ACC teams, those are going to be your 3 locks for tournament time, because ACC has looked like the best conference this year. They're the most consistent outside of an odd Jesuit school in Boston, Massachusetts. They really have been dominant up and down.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see if the committee takes 3 SEC teams or 3 ACC teams in the top 8 seeds, or if they try to get a Big 12 seed in, which we'll talk about here a little bit. But going to Notre Dame as our number 6 team, we had them right behind Miami. I think that they probably have to get to the finals to even have a chance now to be hosting, because of that bad losses to Miami. And it wasn't necessarily bad, but they really didn't look like the Notre Dame team everybody was hoping for. Jake, tell me a little bit about why Notre Dame could not hack it with Miami.
Flat out, Miami was the better team. They were at home, so there was a little bit of an advantage there. But I do kind of think Miami and Virginia Tech are just a class above the rest of the ACC this year. They are the 2 best teams, and when push came to shove, Miami proved it for Notre Dame. Notre Dame got to duck Virginia Tech, but Notre Dame did cancel a ton of games this year, so I think that might hurt them down the stretch, because they just are losing almost 7 or 8 points in terms of eye tests and stuff like that. Because I do kind of think that's going to play in, just because I feel like so many people are giving the RPI so much crap, that the eye test is going to kind of play up a little bit more down the stretch, and the RPI isn't going to be as big of a deal.
Yeah, and their RPI is 16. Do they have to get to the semifinals or finals, AJ?
I mean, I'm looking at their ACC pool, and they have to play Florida State and Virginia. There's the other 2 teams in their pool. So if they can get out of that pool, those are 2 good conference, good wins for them. if they can't, I think it, bumps them down to not being a national seed and really not being in that conversation at all.
Yeah.
I think they're a lock if they get to the semifinals or finals. Anywhere in between, who knows?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, if they take care of business and they beat Virginia and they beat Florida State did rule Virginia earlier today, which was surprising to a lot of Virginia fans with that skid that's been going on. We'll talk about them here in a couple picks. But I think you're right. I think Notre Dame gets to the semis. We start talking about them being a national seed again, right there with that third SEC team. I think it's going to be between them. It'd be interesting to see if they don't. I don't think even if they lose both those games, though, if they drop out of a 16 seed. I think it'd be really hard for them to drop out of 16 right now.
Yeah, the only thing I would have to say is going off what Jake said, they had a lot of games canceled. So they probably have the most variance of a team. They could lock themselves in as a national seed, or they could, if they struggle, be on the verge of, because they don't have the games played. They don't have the RPI. They don't have whatever. And that could come back and really hurt them.
And like zero national player recognition this year.
Right.
No, you don't go out there and you pick anybody from the lineup or from the pitching staff. And you're like, this guy's the dude. There's no national recognition for them this year, which is really strange.
And a pretty crappy stadium too. I know that the NCAA doesn't like to say that, but I mean, it's not a very good stadium. When my buddy went and played there, granted their game was canceled, he said, a bunch of high school fields are even nicer. They have, stands built into grass. It's not a nice stadium by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that's the one thing that's always kind of found me weird is a lot of people are talking about Gonzaga not having the facilities to host. I think Notre Dame doesn't really have the facilities to host.
And it's right in a bad weather area. So if they get a bad weather storm coming through, they've already had 9 games canceled this year. Who's to say they don't get some regional games canceled? My feeling, I hope that Notre Dame does not host. I kind of hope to get ruled in both these ACC games and we don't have to worry about it. But
in June, though, is there any place in the country that's not bad weather?
Arizona.
Texas, Arizona, Scottsdale. Yeah, where they're hosting the Pac-12 tournament. It doesn't rain, but like
that was that's what they need to do is they just need to put, the games, everybody go to the Phoenix metro area. It's like spring training 2.0. There'll be no games canceled. That's what they need to do because
put them all in the practice league and do the Florida and Arizona leagues and split them up and split all the conferences there. Put them all in the minor league stadiums.
But you make them switch coast. You go Pac-12 to Florida.
Swap them sides. I like it. Texas A&M took care of business against Ole Miss. Their RPI took a little dip in that series, but I don't think it really matters. I think all they have to do, for my opinion, is win one. Jake, what do you think they got to do here in Hoover to make sure they're national seed?
I think they're a lock. It really came down to, for me, if they were between Auburn, LSU, and Arkansas. And granted, Arkansas is in the 9th tier with Alabama, but they're down 1. But even a Florida loss, a lot of people have Florida on the 2 line or a 3 line. So this isn't a bad loss for the Aggies. And, if you're looking at the head-to-heads with LSU and Arkansas, A&M has the head-to-heads in both of those, and LSU on the road. So if you're really going to pick one of these teams out of the West, I think A&M is going to be the one that you want to ride your money with, just because it seems like they're not going to have these bad losses down the stretch that a lot of these SEC teams have had. I mean, I know Kentucky's trying to get into the tournament, but that's not a very good loss for Auburn. If Arkansas ends up dropping this game against Alabama, that's not a very good loss, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially since, Auburn just got done playing Kentucky, so they knew everything that was coming at them. They should have been more prepared for that game. AJ, is it that Texas A&M won the West and they're going to get in, or is it that the rest of the teams behind them have not really done enough to push them out of the way?
I mean, at a certain point, it is, if you go and you win a division, you won it. It's not that other teams lost it. You won it. You did what you were supposed to. If other teams didn't, that's on them. Arkansas had it all in front of them. They didn't step up. A&M stepped up. In my opinion, A&M deserves it, but we see the committee grant stuff to teams that don't deserve it. Like D1 baseball has Oregon projected to host.
I don't even want to get into that. We'll get into that later, but yeah.
It's like the Dallas Baptist thing for a long time where they were like, oh, we have Dallas Baptist as a 13. Certain teams don't deserve it. And Texas A&M does deserve a national seed for how they've played, regardless of where they started out this year. People thought they would be, third tier SEC team. Scrub that from your head. How have they played this year? What team are they? What have they done on the field?
That's what I was going to ask. Is it the pedigree? They don't have that baseball pedigree behind them. I hope the committee doesn't take that into effect. I believe that Texas A&M has done everything they've been asked this year. They've beaten teams in front of them. They've beaten teams on the road. They've played well both directions. They have the facilities. I think it'd be awesome for them to host. I really hope they get the chance. I really do. I don't see any way that they don't at this point, but I really hope that they're a national seed. So take care of business tonight and then don't worry about it, right?
That's the
That's
simplest
easy.
way.
Yeah.
Just win and you don't have to worry about it.
Beat Florida tonight and then you don't have to stress about it. Number 8, we had Stanford, who really is the hottest team possibly in the country. I think they're the hottest team in the country now. They won 13 straight. They looked a little flat against Arizona State today, but then they came out and won that game. Brock Jones hit a home run. Bowser hit a home run to dead center that I believe just finally stopped bouncing around in Arizona somewhere. What do you guys think about that one, AJ? You think Stanford jumps all the way up, maybe up to 4?
I mean, I could see Stanford jumping up to 4, depending on how other teams finish. But I think, like you said, they've been so hot. Brock Jones is finally playing like the player I thought he was going to play like the entire year. From my preseason Golden Spikes watch list, he was on there. He's a force. And when he gets going, that's what this team can do.
Yeah. 11 home runs in May. He has 11 home runs in May, which is just nutty.
It's insane. No one wants to see Stanford. Again, a team that you look at and they deserve to be a national seed. They just do. Especially coming on, finishing strong. They've done what they're supposed to.
Yeah. I know when they came to Corvallis, I said many good things about them, and people nationally were blowing me up saying I was crazy. Jake, what do you see against the Stanford team? I don't see many weaknesses for them to drop out at this point.
No, I really don't. They pitch the ball really, really well. They get the clutch hitting when it counts. They might even jump up Oregon State depending on kind of how the weekend folds for Oregon State down the stretch, because they really have earned it. And if they go out and win the Pac-12, that would put them at about 15 wins in a row for Stanford, and that's definitely enough to host, especially the way Oregon State's looked the last 2 weeks. I know that Oregon State kind of had the higher overall record, but if you're going off hottest teams, Stanford definitely deserves to be almost in that 3 range.
The conference does, the committees, they love it when you got a hot team coming in. So I really see that, helping Stanford. I believe that they're probably going to get a top 4 seed, especially with that win today. That puts them in a good spot now. They really don't have to stress anymore the Pac-12. Even if they lose the next 2, it's not the end of the world. They got 1 win there. They're not finishing last. They didn't lose to Arizona State. So I think that they're fine. I think they move on. Team that really struggled, Texas Tech. They had Oklahoma at home, and they couldn't take care of business. Their RPI dropped to 36. They won 1 game there. They didn't end up winning the conference. That went to TCU. They won today. Is that enough, Jake? Is that Texas Tech team going to be a top 16?
I think they're going to be a top 16, but they really didn't look that good against Kansas State today, if I'm being honest with you. They looked really flat. I mean, it is a very big stadium there, so I'm sure, that kind of takes some of the atmosphere out of it. But the flip side of that is it has to be somebody in the Big 12, and all of them kind of look slightly above average. Texas, has that Kansas State series loss and those Air Force losses. Oklahoma State just got swept by was it OU? No, who'd they play?
Oklahoma State.
Yeah, who'd they play? Baylor.
Baylor. They lost. Yeah. They lost 1 game.
Oh, they only lost 1. Yeah. But they really, all these Big 12 teams, they've all kind of looked at times like the best team in the Big 12, and then against inferior opponents, they've looked really flat. I know the midweeks don't matter, but Oklahoma State did lose to Oral Roberts, who's probably not even going to be a tournament team. So it's kind of really, really strange to see how we're going to dissect all these Big 12 teams, and it really does have to be one of them. And I think Texas is going to be the one that I'm going to put my money on being the host. But it wouldn't surprise me if Texas Tech's at 2 out west, especially with how geography's kind of setting up.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know my feeling on the Big 12. I thought it's been pretty mediocre all year. AJ, I know you hated Texas all year. Is Texas Tech going to be able to do enough? Do they have to get to maybe the finals in the Big 12 championship?
I mean, I think Texas Tech is in the position where they have to make a run. How deep that run is, I think, depends on the teams they beat on the way there and who they play and who they finally lose to. It could come down to if they lose to a TCU, then maybe TCU gets that boost, that gets the nod over them. If they lose to a Texas, maybe Texas gets that nod. Oklahoma State, same kind of thing. But if they beat TCU, Texas, and Oklahoma State on the way to losing to Oklahoma or somebody like that, then I think you would have to give the nod to Texas Tech. Not very likely, but the pathway is still there, I believe.
Yeah, the win today sets them up to where they can really do this, what they have to do. They
Right.
have to take care of business. They go beat Oklahoma. They get into the winners bracket final on their side of that bracket. I think that they're fine also. Speaking
Yeah,
of the
just
Big
to kind
12.
of add that though, they did kind of get the really easy draw. So the flip side of that is it'll be a lot easier for them to make it to the finals because they're avoiding Texas, they're avoiding, TCU, Oklahoma State. That side they get OU, West Virginia, and then the Kansas State team that they just beat. So there is, a very very thin room for error there. But these are all very very winnable games for the Red Raiders down the stretch. But
Yeah.
the flip side of that is I don't think they're going to get a lot of credit for beating teams that they should beat.
Yeah, I think if they beat Oklahoma, if Oklahoma hangs on and wins and they play Oklahoma tomorrow, that'll help them enough, I think, to get to where they want to be. And then at that point, I think that they're hosting, being as their RPI is probably the worst amongst our hosts, though at 36, they really do need to win. It's not about sitting there easy. Speaking of a team who really needed to win and did not today, Virginia losing 2 of 3 over the weekend to Louisville, which was at Louisville pretty hard. 15 in the RPI still, but then they lost and got run ruled today. If there's a team that's on the skids with Oregon State, it's definitely Virginia, AJ. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Virginia is almost setting themselves up to be a 2 seed. They are just stumbling, even when they have a good side, a good game offensively. Pitching's letting them down. When they're having a good pitching game, it's a 1-0 ball game and they can't score. So they've been frustrating because you will see it for a game, and then you won't see it for a couple. It's been how Florida State has been this year, and they're just falling out a little bit. And they could always finish strong. They have a bunch of good wins, a bunch of good series wins still on their record. But I don't think a lot of us from the start they had this year could see them not being a national seed, which is a very real possibility.
Yeah, they might be falling their way all the way out of the top 16 here, especially because, like we said, they got to play Notre Dame still, so that's not going to be easy. They really didn't help themselves. I know that in my last Omaha 8, I didn't have them in it because I thought that they were stumbling. I thought that they could correct ship. They have the most explosive offense, really. Jake, can that offense get going enough for them? Do they have to really blow the doors off this Notre Dame game?
I really do think that, and if I'm being honest, I don't really think that that's something that's in the cards for them just based on how they've been playing down the stretch here. They really have kind of played themselves off down into this 2 seed region. But again, Geloff and them, they're going to travel really well. I'm really not too worried about them as much as like a Texas Tech or, the Cardinals of Kentucky. But I think, if you're looking at teams that are falling out of the ACC, they're going in the wrong direction and they're going in the wrong direction fast.
Yeah, they had a tough schedule, but everybody in the ACC did. So you can't really blame it on
Yeah,
schedule. Like everybody had to play really hard games, but it didn't help them. And our next team was kind of the opposite. We thought that they were set up after they played so well in the beginning half. Auburn, they lose 3 of the last 4 to Kentucky. They're single eliminated out of the SEC tournament. In my opinion, I think that pushes them out of the 16. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I think they're definitely out. We are kind of running out of teams here to, put into the top 8. And, 3 of 4 to Kentucky, the team that was actually almost off the bubble, it seemed like it before that series, is definitely not a recipe to host. Sonny D did have that big home run, but other than that, their offense really didn't look that good today against Kentucky, and they came out flat. You could tell the rain kind of got to them. And this is really a team that didn't need to have that happen. They're going in the wrong direction. They're going to have to be traveling somewhere, and it's probably going to be a really hard regional for them because they're probably going to have to play one of those ACC teams.
A team that didn't travel well, AJ. Are they going to struggle here? I don't think they get the 16. Where do you have them sitting now?
So for me, one of the teams that could slide up depending on how they do is putting themselves in that position is like a Florida State. I could see them being, if Florida State finishes strong and steals, that host. I could see them going there. I don't see them hosting anymore. They're going to be put somewhere. It might be one of the, if TCU hosts, it might be 2 seed in that regional. Unfortunately, just based off of geography, there are a lot of SEC teams around. So unless it's someone like Southern Miss or one of those Texas or Florida teams, that could be a 2 seed in Virginia Tech. They could be sent to travel more than your good 2 seed would normally have to go travel.
Yeah, they don't have a dominant dude on the mound right now, and I think that's the other thing. That offense has kind of let them down a little bit. They had very good starters, but nobody that really could go out there and shut down a 1 seed. So we'll have to see going forward. Oklahoma State, another team, struggled with the Baylor series. They won 2 or 3, but they really didn't look good, and then they came out, didn't score a run against Texas. Texas hasn't had any pitching. Jake, tell me how Oklahoma State struggled so much there. That's embarrassing, right?
Yeah, Texas does have one good starting pitcher, kind of like A&M. They almost seem like they're mirror images of each other, if I'm being honest with you. But Oklahoma State had a chance to come out and get 4 losses, really put the nail in Texas's coffin. And Texas is still kind of has that little bitty ounce of hope. Oklahoma State really hasn't looked good this entire year when I've watched them. Yeah, they played Baylor, but I mean they just got swept by Tech the week before, and I think that's still kind of lingering in a lot of people's minds because Tech really didn't look that good against OU. So all these Big 12 teams, we really don't know kind of how good they are, and it seems like it's going to be a one-team bracket or one-team host, and then they're going to send a lot of these teams to these ACC, SEC hosts. But yeah, I think they're squarely out right now, and they really don't strike me. I would love for them to be a 2 in an A&M region because there is a big gap between them, and I've noticed with Texas. I know that they went in and beat Texas, but that's not really the same team as what I've seen.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 gets 2. I don't know if they get a national seed, but I think they get 2 in there somehow just because the committee loves to put 2 of those Big 12 teams in there. With Texas Tech and Texas and TCU. TCU we haven't even put in the top 16. Has Oklahoma State played their way out of it by this loss, or can they get back in it? Do they have to win the tournament now, AJ?
I think as of right now, they've played their way out of it. If they go and make a run, they can play their way back in. But looking at the Big 12, for the top 16 seeds, I think you're going to get 2. And yeah, I think TCU probably has slid in and replaced Oklahoma State, especially if TCU can beat Texas tomorrow. That'll be huge for them. But it would take something special for Oklahoma State to bump TCU back out of their spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that Texas Tech has the easiest road. We already talked about that. I think as long as they take care of business, they're in. And I think that the other seed's going to go to Texas or TCU. I think Oklahoma State has played their way out. It's a really hard bracket to get back into. Speaking of a team that has played their way in, Louisville winning those 2 out of 3. They lost in their game today, but I think that they are good enough. I think that they are better than what Virginia is. I think they're playing better ball right now. I think the committee wants to have a game in Kentucky there. I think Louisville's the spot where you put it. AJ, tell me how I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're
Okay.
right. And I think Louisville, ticks the box for a lot of different, geographical. Plus it's a great home environment. People love watching postseason baseball at Louisville. And they have finished well. They've done what they're supposed to do in the ACC. Yes, the loss to Pitt today hurts, but they didn't look bad. They didn't get blown out like Virginia did. It was a 1-run game, and that happens in tournaments. So right now they're ranked in the top 10. They're probably going to get a 14, 15, somewhere around their seed. They're not going to be a national seed unless they go on and win the ACC tournament.
I think they're out.
They're
with
out.
How
They're
Pitt
out now
did it.
'cause
So game today
Pitt-
really doesn't. Yeah.
Pitt
So
stole it, but I think that they have the 7 RPI even with the loss today. I'm with you. I think, and that Pitt team has a lot of seniors. They're playing for a lot. This is the only way that they get in is by getting to the semifinals.
Yep.
They did that. I'm with you.
Pitt has to make a run. So Louisville looking at right now, again, I think they're a 14.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I had them anywhere from 12 to 16 this week. I think that that's where they're probably going to end up. I think if Virginia drops out, I wouldn't surprise me, but I'd be more surprised if Louisville drops out. Jake, what do you think on this Louisville team?
Yeah, when you look at the body of work kind of from the last month, 6-8 weeks down the stretch here, Louisville has, I said it again, the Cardinals have looked really dominant down the stretch here, and they've looked like the number 2 team in the ACC outside of Virginia Tech. The Pitt loss, Pitt really does have a lot to play for, and Pitt could very well end up being a tournament team. Even this Georgia Tech game tomorrow, I know that they really don't have a lot to play for. I think they're even a host if they go 0-2, just with kind of how everybody around them's playing down, in my opinion.
I think this game matters more for Georgia Tech the way that they've played. I think that they really got to come out and beat Louisville to have a chance there. But I think Louisville takes care of business. I think they win that game. I think they knock their Georgia Tech down and maybe even out of the tournament. 14, we had Gonzaga, who took care of business, won the WCC, beat San Diego. I know they had one loss in there, but they had to play a doubleheader, and it's always tough to win twice in one day. They are 26 in the RPI now. We've mentioned that we have problems with their stadium. Jake, do you think they deserve to host?
From a blind test, you're just looking at the team itself. I think they do. But from a committee standpoint, I don't think they do. You know, they did lose a couple of games in the West Coast Conference, and it almost seems like you need to go undefeated to be a host. They do kind of, unfortunately, have the unfortunate luck to where Southern Miss is also kind of playing good, and they're probably going to host. And I've noticed that they really don't like to do two of those mid-major hosts. So I think there's just a lot of stuff stacked against Gonzaga outside of their control. But yeah, they're going to be a very, very dangerous too.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people looked at their team ERA, and that's great. A lot of people looked at their team batting average, and it's not so great. I watched them live 6 times this year. I thought that they could hit the ball around the yard quite a bit, but, you know, that team batting average is pretty bad. AJ, do you think that the committee is going to buy into a third West Coast team?
Well, considering the first two are basically locks for national seeds, I don't know if it's going to weigh on the committee as much. You know, if they were deciding between, you know, say Stanford struggled down the stretch and was clinging on, and they were deciding between Stanford and Gonzaga, I think then it becomes more of a question. Right now, I would have Gonzaga in as a national seed just based off of body of work and who they are and what they've done. You know, even the UConn argument, UConn lost, like they lost a conference series in a very, very, very bad conference. And they didn't play anybody all year. Gonzaga has played people, and they haven't had, they have a couple losses in their conference, but by and large, they've done what they're supposed to do. I would have them in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that their wins against Oklahoma State really boost them once the committee takes a look at their non-conference and looks at the full body of work. You know, beating Oregon State once, going down and sweeping Oklahoma State, that was big for them. We had Vandy at 15, 0-3 against LSU, getting swept out. They won yesterday, but it wasn't really in convincing fashion. They didn't look spectacular yesterday. Do they have to go on a run here in the SEC tournament? Do they even get in unless they win the SEC tournament? What do you think, AJ?
With Vandy, I think they have to win it. They got their doors blown off by LSU at home. That's so hard to bounce back from in the eyes of the committee, because that's their last, you know, how'd you finish the regular season? Well, by getting absolutely demolished at home by an LSU team who had just gotten demolished at home by Ole Miss. So it wasn't like LSU was coming in tearing the cover off the ball.
Correct.
So it's tough for Vandy, but you know, my bold prediction was they don't host, and right now I think it becomes a question of, do you look at Southern Miss or Vandy, who deserves to host more? And I think the answer is Southern Miss.
Oh, I think Southern Miss for sure. I'm high on Southern Miss. I've been high on them for months. And you know, those losses, they don't help them. Their RPI is still so good, but they didn't play anybody in non-conference. They have a losing record in the SEC, which blows my mind that people are like, oh yeah, they're so good. They had a losing record. They finished 8th in the SEC. Don't tell me that they're good. Jake, what is the logic there? Is there any logic to having Vandy in?
The only thing that I can kind of anticipate is if they win the SEC, that would mean that they would have had to have beaten Tennessee twice. And that's really the only way I kind of see them hosting, is them winning it. But I think the bigger story that we're going to be talking about from that Vandy Ole Miss game is it really pushed Ole Miss off the bubble. A lot of these teams that are kind of around them are playing deep into their tournaments. And Ole Miss, I mean, they had no approach at the plate last night. I know that the freshman that they faced was really good, but it didn't even seem like they were threatening those first 6 innings.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about those here coming up, because, I do want to get into those conference games that might push teams in or push teams out. Let's talk about a couple bubble teams here really fast. Or Southern Miss, sorry, number 16, Southern Miss. They took care of business. I believe that they're in no matter what. I think that they should be hosting. I think that ballpark's gorgeous. They can get about 6,400 people in there on the berms and everything. No reason for them not to host. They're the best team in Mississippi. Tell me that, Jake. Tell me anything about that makes no sense to you.
They're going to be in. If you're an Ole Miss fan, you have to be the biggest Southern Miss fan for this weekend, because that's the only way I see is if someone in the Conference USA sneaks in and steals one of those bids. And you don't get to see LSU and Vandy host if Southern Miss hosts. So if Ole Miss fans need to be rooting for Southern Miss, I think they're going to be the mid-major team. We've kind of seen UConn fall a little bit. Maryland really hasn't looked that strong at times this year. I think they're going to be, the 15 seed. I think they're, as I said, I don't even think they'll be the 16. I think they'll be the 15. They're going to be well in hosting a tournament. They've hosted tournaments before. They sell it out. It'll be really interesting to see if they sell it out without Mississippi State to kind of boost it. But yeah, they pack people in there. Their ballpark isn't really a mid-major by any stretch. I think they average more attendance than a lot of the Pac-12 schools.
Yeah, and they do. I mean, that's what it comes down to. AJ, they are the team that we're looking for the mid-major. They've shown everything they need to. They beat every team in Mississippi this year. Is there anything that makes you question if they should be in the top 15, top 16 seeds here?
Nothing makes me question it. The committee is always its own different animal. But again, looking at what they've done, and not only that, but looking at their ballpark environment, it's not only a Power 5 environment, it's a true SEC environment. Those people love baseball. And that's one thing the committee will have no questions about of, do they have the facilities and capability to host? Is it an environment that we're going to want to put on a national stage? Absolutely. It is one of the best environments in college baseball. That paired with the team itself and how they're doing and how they've dominated a very strong conference should put them in. They should be a lock.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I love Pac-12 baseball. I love going to Goss games. Corvallis, it's great. They had 30,000 more fans this year down in Southern Miss. So you can't tell me that those fans are not going to show out. It's not going to be crazy. I love when they hit the home runs and the lights are going bonkers and that ballpark looks like it's a old school minor league stadium. I love it. I hope that they get in there. My thought is that they're going to match them up against an SEC team for the Supers, which would be kind of fun for them. I think that'd be pretty exciting. But speaking of some teams that are right on the bubble here, Georgia, everybody had them right on the bubble. They're out, right, AJ? They're out.
Yeah, they got to be out. I mean, I didn't even have them. They would have had to make a run to be on the bubble, in my opinion. They just haven't done what they're supposed to do.
Their late season struggles are huge. Losing that series to Missouri was bad. Any thoughts other than that, Jake? I mean, their RPI is still 18, but I don't think it matters.
No, and they're almost playing their way too into a dangerous, regional now. They do seem to be headed in the wrong direction. They looked pretty punchless. I know the rain kind of slowed things down, but yeah, when you look at that Missouri series, that's going to stick in people's mind. And then that opening game, not even making it to the final 8 double elimination, they're definitively out. I think they're about as out as Tennessee is a 1, if I'm being honest with you.
I think that they get sent somewhere maybe against the top 4 seeds as the 2 seed, which is not where you want to be right now. Texas, we talked about them. They took care of business against Kansas. They also won today against Oklahoma State. Their RPI is now 20. Is that going to be good enough to get them in? It's if they win the tournament. I think they have to win the tournament. Hey, Jake, tell me why they got to win the tournament here, buddy.
Yeah, that'll give them the 2 big wins over either Oklahoma State or TCU. One of them they're going to have to beat twice. They're going to get the Vandy treatment. They're going to be one of those teams that, the NCAA wants to host. They're almost like an anti-Gonzaga. They really haven't earned the right to host, but they seem to be, getting hot at the right time. And the flip side of that I was thinking about, do they deserve to host, is if I was a 1, I would be very, very scared about the Texas Longhorns coming to town. They bang the ball around the yard. Every single game outside of that first one, I think, is going to have to take double digits to win. And they are going to be a very, very dangerous 2. But the way the Big 12 is kind of set up this year, I know that they don't have any of the tiebreakers over Tech or Oklahoma State or anything like that. But, the quote-unquote eye test of, we're Vandy, we're Texas, we deserve to host. I think that's going to play really, really big down the stretch.
And you know how much the committee doesn't care about those head-to-head matchups, it seems.
Yeah.
They look past them every time. AJ, you've been steadfast against this Texas team. Do you think that they get in now?
I mean, I think there is a path, but they have to at least make the finals, in my opinion, to feel good about a spot. because it would include some pretty good wins. If if they lose to TCU and then lose to Oklahoma State again and are out of the Big 12 tournament, then you know then they're not going to even be in the consideration. They will get a boost because they are Texas. But kind of the opposite of what Jake said. If Texas does go host and I'm a good 2 seed, I want to go play at Texas because they have a, like we said, a good number one arm.
Yeah.
And besides that, do they have the depth of pitching to be a dangerous 1 seed? The offense is there, but pitching wins you regionals. And I would want to go play a host that doesn't have a great pitching staff.
As much as I love Ivan Melendez, and I think that having the Golden Spikes winner, in my opinion, he's right there. He should win the award. The committee would like to see him as a 1 seed. I don't think they are a 1 seed. I think that the way they're going to do this, though, is whoever wins the 2 sides of the bracket here in the Big 12 are probably going to be the hosts. So if Texas takes their business on their side, TCU, Oklahoma State, or Texas, whoever wins that side, Texas is probably poised the best to win it. But I think if TCU wins it, I'd have no problem giving them a host either. UC Santa Barbara, taking care of business, but they don't have anybody. They don't play anybody. It would be a 3rd or 4th West Coast team. I don't see a way that they give them a seed. AJ, do you see any way that they give UCSB a seed?
The only way I see them getting a seed if Gonzaga gives up their baseball team. And then the committee goes, we need another West Coast team because they would be the next West Coast team in line. But I think Gonzaga has such a firm grip ahead of them. But UCSB is going to be a 2 seed that people don't want to play. And they're going to be put out in a regional out west. And that team's going to look up and go, you've got to be kidding me. So
yeah, I agree. I think Stanford is going, please don't send them to us right now. Corvallis is saying the same thing. Oregon State's like, please don't send them to us.
Yeah, it's like hot potato. They're throwing the Gauchos around.
I think if Gonzaga does host, I think that they go to Gonzaga, and I think that's a great series. Jake, I know they don't have any national wins. They really haven't done anything. They're 36th in the RPI. Is there anything that the Gauchos can do at this point?
Maybe petition the Big West to start a tournament. They could add, Cal Poly and Hawaii and these good wins down the stretch. But, when you're playing Bakersfield, they're going to go out and sweep, and everybody's going to go, okay, you deserve to sweep. You're the better team. You're a tournament team. They're not. So that's really the only thing is I think they're firmly out. There's just too many other mid-majors that are in front of them. ECU, I almost think, has a legitimate gripe over them just because I don't think UC Barbara has those strong out-of-conference wins that Gonzaga does.
Yeah, and East Carolina did a lot of the things, they struggled early. Let's talk about another team, though, that a lot of people have high. They're 3 in the RPI, which blows my mind. Maryland. I know they got a couple dudes on the mound. I know that a lot of people think that they should be hosting. That conference is horrible. It's not a power conference. It really does nothing to me. It makes me feel nothing watching them win ball games in there. They really didn't crush the conference competition. Jake, why is Maryland getting all the love?
I think a lot of those early Texas 2-steps that they did earlier in the year against Baylor are kind of sticking in people's minds because at the time Baylor was pretty high ranked. I do think that they are going to have a legitimate gripe kind of in that 13-14 range, just because the way it's kind of playing out with a lot of projections. I've noticed Iowa is kind of been in for some strange reason. And if this is a 3-team conference, the winner of that conference, I think, should get to host. That's really the only thing. They expanded the seating, but, we're looking on paper. The Big Ten isn't very good. Rutgers kind of surprised a lot of people. Iowa isn't really a tournament team in my opinion. So no, I don't think Maryland should host, but I think that they might host just because of the way that, the Big Ten's kind of been propped up this year.
What do you think, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have an inflated win total just playing in that conference. And the only way that I will sit here and say, okay, they deserve the opportunity to be in consideration is if they go and they win the Big Ten tournament. If they don't go and win, then that means you lost to some not very good baseball teams along the way. Being the 1 seed, they don't even have Rutgers on that side of the bracket. So they would have to lose to, have the bracket right here. They'd have to lose to Indiana, Illinois, or Michigan.
Yeah.
A combined total of 2 times.
And Illinois has a horrible out of conference schedule, so that's really not going to give them any boost at all. I know that they're really high ranked in the Big Ten, but I want to say they were under 500 pretty late into the season.
Yeah, and those RPI games are not going to help them, which furthers my hatred of the RPI. Maryland is not the third best team in the country. They don't deserve to be ranked that hard in the RPI. I'm with you, AJ, Jake. I don't like it. They're probably going to get a host, though, unfortunately, because of the RPI. And if they win that conference, I think they don't have to win it necessarily. If they get to the title game, I think the committee puts them in there because they kind of make their mind up before that title game anyway. LSU, what can they do to do it? What can they do to get in, AJ?
Keep doing what they did to Vanderbilt. If they go on a run in the SEC tournament, and again, in my opinion, they don't have to win as many games as Maryland would have to win because of who you play. LSU would have to beat some very good teams. If they beat Tennessee once, I think that would put them in. Especially because you probably have to win to face Tennessee. So I
have to beat Kentucky. They're almost sad that Auburn didn't win to give them a better win, but Kentucky's not a bad ball club. Still not a bad game. They just got to go, beat them up like they did last weekend against Vandy. Jake, what do you see from LSU? I have them as needing 2 wins if it stays double elimination. If it's single, the 1 win against Kentucky might be enough. But what do you think?
I think they are going to be on the outside looking in. With Ole Miss not going as deep as they would have liked, that is really going to stick with the committee's mind that they got swept at home against Ole Miss. And if Ole Miss ends up missing the tournament, and that very, very late season point, I think, is what's going to hold LSU back. But, they do have a lot of stuff in front of them. They will get to have to play Tennessee twice if they end up beating them. And again, I think any team that beats Tennessee twice that's, around this range is going to be very, very deserving of a conference tournament. I don't think they beat Tennessee even once, if I'm being honest with you. They don't really match up against Tennessee very well. And I think that they're going to be a very, dangerous too, which, they were a very good road team this year. So that's really not that much of a stretch for them.
Yeah, just don't send them out west. At least let them play east this time. The committee keeps sending them out west. Doesn't seem fair for them. I got 2 more teams that I want to talk about, and we can talk about at the same time because they're both in the same conference, kind of in the same boat right now. North Carolina playing their best ball, and Florida State. Jake, do you have either one of them having any chance of getting there?
I don't. I think it's too much of an uphill battle. I think Florida State had too many bad games earlier in the year. And, they have, a great frontline starter, but outside of that, they really haven't looked that good. Same with North Carolina. It seems like they're almost kind of getting the pedigree treatment with Vandy in Texas, where they're just kind of being propped up. If you look at resumes and records and stuff like that, they're not even sniffing a host.
Yeah. AJ, you got any opinion on either one?
I think you look at North Carolina, and they've definitely been playing their best baseball recently. But for both of those teams, I think you can comfortably slide them in as a 2 seed. Even if they go and win their conference tournament, then they might be favorably placed as a 2 seed. I just don't see them sliding up to that 1 line.
Yeah, and they are really bad too on the road. That's another thing too that I think the committee is going to hold against them.
Both those teams played bad. They both had inconsistent games. They're both getting a little hot now, and they both have pitching staffs. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. They could be dangerous 2 seeds. I'm with you guys there. Let's talk about some conference tournament issues here already. Georgia has to be like the biggest one, right? Like that was just so bad for them to lose that conference game and doing the 2 of 3. We talked about it earlier. AJ, how far down do they drop in the 2 line?
They're going to cling on to the 2 line, but anytime you're clinging on to anything, you're obviously not feeling great about where you are. And they're in the position where a couple teams on that 3 line could bump Georgia down because Georgia hasn't finished the season well at all. I know they're banged up. I know they're basically being carried by the Tate brothers, but they're not in a good spot at all.
Yeah. Jake, what do you see from that Georgia team? How do they hang on and how do they turn this thing around now? Because now they're just waiting to find out their seed.
I think a lot of the 3 teams that are behind them have to kind of play their way off the bubble, and a lot of these bubble teams kind of have to slide in. I think that's really the only way that Georgia stays a 2, but they really deserve to be a 3 with how they've played down the stretch. They haven't really looked that dominant. They're not a very good SEC team, in my opinion. They're sliding the wrong direction. They got a lot of injuries. It's a recipe for disaster, it seems like.
It is. Speaking of another team in the SEC that's sliding, Auburn. That was a horrible last weekend for them, then coming in and losing the same way to that Kentucky team. You thought they were going to turn around after Sonny D hit that home run and got his team pumped up, and then they turn around and give up 2 bombs in the top of the ninth. Jake, where do they fall now?
I think they're going to be a definitive, ACC 2. They're probably going to have to play a Louisville or one of those schools in that range. But you really have to give your hats off to the Kentucky Wildcats. I think that's really going to be the story of that game, is that Kentucky's kind of playing their way back into the tournament along with Alabama. And, they beat Tennessee, so they have, probably the best win of any team. They have some horrible, horrible losses that'll be tough to overcome. But hats off to them. I don't think their seniors want to, give up and go work at Northwestern Mutual quite yet.
AJ, where do you see them going? I see them as the ACC competitor somewhere in that range. I think they're a high 2, but what do you got them at?
Yeah, I could see them being there or the Southern Miss too. I just don't think there's much. They haven't helped themselves. And you look at the team, and they, outside of Sonny DeShera, who makes that team go. And I think they've kind of run into that problem of, well, we got one guy we rely on. Who's our ace on the staff? And crickets. Who can we trust to jumpstart this team? Crickets. So it's, and even weirdly enough to say, Sonny DeShera is hitting below 400 now, which means he's cooled off.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly what I was going to say. He was so hot in carrying that team and really putting makeup on a lot of their flaws earlier in this season. And then this last weekend against Kentucky, he gets 1 hit. It was a home run, but he had 1 hit. And today he had 3 strikeouts going into that one. And he finally got a home run to tie that game up. They only go as far as he can go, and I think that he's carried them about as far as they're going to go. So
yep.
I'm with you. I think that they're done. Speaking of a team that's going the other direction, though, Pittsburgh. I tweeted out a huge thing about them going crazy and getting that win. They're now in the semifinals. What do they have to do, AJ? Is that enough to put them in the tournament? They're right there on the bubble.
I think it should be, because if you look at some bubble teams, I know Clemson's on the bubble, and I think they're trending the wrong direction. There are a lot of teams that are going to be on the bubble that are falling off because they're not going to be able to have the wins to stay on. And I think Pitt has put themselves in position where they have played their way into the tournament.
Jake?
Yeah, I know I've been very, very critical of Pitt this entire year. I've said, Pitt is shit and stuff like that. But the ACC is the best conference in the country, it seems like, this year. And it really shouldn't be a question if a top 4 team, they're going to have the 2 really, really strong wins this weekend. They won their, little, whatever you call it, pool, whatever. Pod, pool, scrum.
Whatever.
And, barring, a blowout of, Virginia proportions, I really do think that they're in the tournament right now because they are hotter than Ole Miss. I think that that's really who it's going to come down to is Ole Miss. Mercer's kind of played their way off the bubble. UTSA, if it's UTSA and Pitt, it's Pitt, no question. So I think that's what's kind of drawing me towards Pitt is they are an ACC team despite kind of, being so far north and, playing in the Berg.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of their conference wins too, they played tough. They did not let up on anybody. They played hard. And then these wins against Georgia Tech, who needed a win, they looked like crap. And then they beat Louisville today. I think that they're in. I'd love to see them play one more solid game. I think even if the next game's close, they're for sure in. And like you said, weighing them against these other bubble teams, you kind of weigh out that Pitt's better than them. So I'd like to see them get a chance. It's funny you mentioned Clemson, AJ, because I had them next. Clemson losing to North Carolina 9-2. They really didn't look like they wanted to be there. Does Clemson have any shot now?
No. The fact that they're still around is just going off of the ACC being so strong and their RPI being where it is. Yeah. Those values don't add up. They barely qualified for the ACC tournament. Yeah. And if it wasn't for that Jesuit school up in the Northeast, who they had setting up for their last series weekend, they weren't playing great baseball going into that. I didn't have them beating any other team that weekend outside of Boston College. So they don't deserve to be in. That's just where it is. And that's not even me as a South Carolina person. That's me going, look, just because you are not in the bottom 2 of a really good conference doesn't mean you should be in.
Yeah, I don't think we put Kentucky in, even though they beat Tennessee and they've won some great games. They're still right there on the bottom. So I think Clemson's the same. Jake, you got anything different on Clemson, or is it just all the same here?
I think it's the same. They really haven't, looked good this entire season. I know that they were one of the last undefeated teams, but again, they didn't really play anybody. They really haven't looked good. I mean, we're not sitting here talking about, Missouri or Mississippi State being in the tournament, so we really shouldn't hold Clemson. Maybe it's because they don't wear gray pants or something that people are holding them to some kind of higher standard. But no, they're definitively out. I think that, they're even behind a lot of those mid-major teams kind of jockeying down the stretch. They do get to play Virginia Tech, though. And if they do beat Virginia Tech, that'll be a really, really big win that I think the committee is kind of looking for every reason to put Clemson in over UTSA, Old Dominion, that kind of group of teams. So right now, I think they're out, but that Virginia Tech series, it'll kind of be very interesting to see. And I think they actually are officially out though, because Virginia Tech would hold the RPI tiebreaker over them. So they're officially out of the tournament. But again, they have a lot to play for with Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it's a big game for them. Speaking of Old Dominion, like you said, they won 18. They scored 18 today. They had 5 home runs. They're a bubble team that really wants to be on the inside there. I think they're going to push some of those bigger conference teams out. AJ, do you have any thoughts on that Old Dominion team?
I mean, I think they struggled from what we thought they should have been earlier on in the year. But they're trying to heat up at the right time and play their way in.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity to.
They do. And, they're playing their best ball of the season coming down the stretch here. They're not going to win the conference. They might win it here in the conference tournament, but they didn't win the regular season. Jake, are they going to be the team that bumps some of these bubble teams off that are in major conferences?
I do. The only thing that kind of worries me is that Kentucky and Alabama are both still alive, and I think that if Kentucky and Alabama both go very deep into the tournament, I do see Old Dominion kind of getting knocked off. But there are a lot of teams in front of them that are kind of falling back. I think Ole Miss is falling back. UTSA, they'll have a chance to play UTSA in this tournament, and if they win, I think that's the easiest path for both UTSA and Old Dominion is just win the whole thing. Crazier things have happened with the Conference USA tournament. Southern Miss, it seems like, doesn't really have that much to play for because they are locked up. And if they lose to a fringe tournament team, it is what it is. They're a tournament team. Tournament teams lose to other tournament teams.
Yeah, it's baseball. You can lose at any given time. And with the weather delays, I think a lot of these teams that are higher ranking are going to get the passes, and the lower ranking team are going to get no credit. So I don't think it hurts them to lose that one. As you talked about, Alabama, that game's official. They beat Arkansas. What does this do for Arkansas? How bad is that hurting their playability right now, Jake?
I think Arkansas is quickly falling back into that 16 regional that's setting up for them in Tennessee. They're going to have to play very, very tough too. But I think Alabama has kind of played their way back into the tournament. They destroyed a really, really good Georgia team that a lot of people have, kind of in that 1-2 range before they beat them. And then they looked really good in that Arkansas game today. They looked like the better team that Arkansas just kind of hung around with them. But man, the turnaround of Alabama, it seems like in the past 2 weeks, they're getting timely hitting. They're being aggressive on the base pass, making them throw them out. And it really is kind of a new identity for Alabama. And they're going to be a very, very tough out if they do make the tournament.
That team looked very blah today without Dave Van Horn. Do you think that was part of it, AJ, or do you think that team's just kind of tired and kind of going through the motions?
For me, I think that's kind of going through the motions, and they're playing a team that, is fighting for their lives. So that's never a good recipe if you're just sitting there not totally invested and the other team's bringing the energy to the ballpark. The team that's not invested is in trouble. I don't care if they're better. The team who has more to play for, who is bringing the energy, is going to win the majority of those games. We saw that happen today.
We saw it happen last year in the Supers, too. It felt like that Arkansas team, as soon as they got down a little bit, their heads dropped. I hope it's not the same, but it really had that same feeling today when they were down 4-1 to Alabama. It's Alabama, folks. Take care of it. If you're an Arkansas fan, I understand you're a little bit of fear here, but man, that didn't look good for Arkansas today, and I think that really hurts them in the national seed. I think that they have to win this next elimination game. If they get a chance, the SEC might make this a single elimination tournament and eliminate them already. So I hope not, but we'll see what goes forward here. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, AJ, Ole Miss. Where do we have them? I don't know. I'm going to let you go first.
To me, Ole Miss is probably the biggest head scratcher because over the past month, they've been 3 different teams. And when a team's been that inconsistent, I think you have to take a step even further back and just compare numbers and records. And, yes, this team has been ranked number 1 in the country, but this team was also last in the SEC very recently. So it's not like they're, they haven't been ranked, but they've been a fringe top 25 team. That's not where they've been.
Yeah.
So as of right now, with that loss to Vandy, I would not have them in the tournament. If somebody does, I understand it. But it would depend a lot on who you have them in over. If you have them in over a Pitt, I have a problem with it. If you have them in over an Old Dominion right now, I have a problem with it. If you have been over a Clemson, I don't.
Yeah.
But it would depend a lot on how the rest of stuff shakes out. They have to hope a lot of people lose and a lot of people who are already locks win their conference tournament to be in. They can't afford any bid stealers.
I agree. I think they're sitting there rooting for all these mid-majors that are one already going for it. Jake, where do you have Ole Miss?
I have Ole Miss out right now. You go back and look, they almost disappeared for a month. I know that they were the number 1 team in the country, but it almost seemed like an afterthought. Like they was like, okay, I guess we'll just throw Ole Miss up there. They really didn't ever feel like they were the best team in the country. They were just kind of spaced between when Texas was being dominant and before we all kind of respected Tennessee. But ever since that game at Tennessee came in and kind of stole Ole Miss's spirit, and they disappeared for a month until they really got to play Missouri. And again, are you really going to give applause for them beating Missouri to kind of kickstart their season? They really only looked good in about one weekend this year. That was that LSU series on the road. And I don't think that that was enough with the way, LSU's kind of looked with their inconsistency. They did get swept at Arkansas, LSU did. So I really don't know how to feel about that LSU game. But again, I don't think they've done enough. They're going to be watching, praying, hoping that UConn wins their conference, that Gonzaga wins their conference. Even Campbell is going to be another one. Liberty, DBU, every single thing that they can get with these smaller teams that are looking, add 1 or 2 teams. Ole Miss really has to have every single chip fall. It's kind of like that scene in Dumb and Dumber with Lloyd Christmas, where it's like, so you're saying there's a chance? There's a very, very slim chance with Ole Miss. And, with how Pitt's played, now how Bama's played, it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it does feel like they are getting squeezed out.
It does with the way other teams are playing. And I know that, 6 weeks ago I was really hard on them and Mississippi State and saying that I thought USM was the better team in the state. And people were losing their minds on me thinking that Ole Miss, because they were still ranked higher at the time. Now I feel a little bit bad because they slid a little bit too far down the road there. I think that Alabama's playing their way above them. I think that Pitt's played their way above them. I'd be really hard pressed to say that there's, the Old Dominions of the world are not going to be above them also. I have them out as well. I don't have them in the tournament. I think they've done too little too late to try to get their game back. And then when they lose that game last night, they looked out of it for the whole game. They didn't really look like a tournament team at all until the end of that game trying to make the comeback. So I have them out as well. The last one that's really here that I had on my list was Texas beating Oklahoma State 4-0. Oklahoma State, a team that's supposed to be banging the ball around the yard, and they really didn't look the part. What do you got, Jake? Why do we keep them, talk about them for a 1 seed?
I honestly couldn't tell you why we keep talking about Oklahoma State. Every time I've watched them, they've looked really bad. Granted, I only watched, the first 7 innings of that Sunday Texas game, them against Oral Roberts, then Texas today. But every time I've watched them, they've looked really flat. They really haven't looked that good. It seems like they're almost like the Gonzaga, where it's like, okay, I guess they won this weekend. Let's go ahead and move them up. Everybody else in front of them lost. I remember they were as high as 4 in some teams' regionals or some teams' projections and stuff like that as the 4 seed. They are not by any stretch of the imagination. The Big 12 is down this year, and Oklahoma State's one of the reasons why. And I know I'm kind of, shitting on the Pokes, and I was really high on them in the softball show, but I don't see them being a 1 regional at all. I know that they have that new stadium, but, if I'm an SEC team that's a 2 seed, I'm praying I get sent to Stillwater.
AJ, 3 weeks ago, you and I wrote an article. We had them high. They were 34-13 at the time. They looked like they were playing their best ball. And then they go out and play terrible against Texas Tech. What do they do to get right, I guess, would be my question right now after that loss to Texas today.
The only way they host is if they win the Big 12 tournament. Because then they got to go, and you probably have to beat Texas twice. and then hopefully for them, they would have to beat Tech on the other side of things as well. It's again 3 weeks ago they were in a great spot.
Yeah.
But we also said during that time, we would see who this Oklahoma State team is because of who they have to play these last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we've seen that,
They
yes,
showed us.
Yeah, they're a tournament team. There's no doubt about that, but they're not an elite team. And that's what we've seen.
I'm with you. I think it speaks volumes about that conference. I think that conference is very mediocre. I spoke it out. I think that the 2 teams that get to the final are the 2 teams that will host, and that's it. Because I don't think anybody else in that conference deserves to host. I don't think that they've done enough to say, "Oh, I'm not in the finals of my own conference," that they should be in there. So I don't have anything else on that one, fellas. Do we have any questions today, Jake?
We did not. There was one mid-major one I wanted to talk about.
Let's talk about it.
Do you think DBU has to win their conference tournament to get in, or do you think they're definitively in with how high their RPI is? They finished 3rd in their conference. They had a really, really good out-of-conference schedule, but do you think that that is one of those things where they have to win?
I knew you were going to bring this up. They're number 12 in the RPI right now.
For no reason. For no reason.
I feel like they're getting the Vandy treatment just because they've had such good teams in the past. I feel like they're living a little bit on their baseball chat forever. When you talk about conferences, you keep talking about them. They were supposed to blow the doors off that conference. They were supposed to crush every team in that conference. They didn't do it. They didn't take care of business during the season. I don't love them, but I think that they're going to get in the tournament. I think they're going to be a 3 seed somewhere just because of their RPI.
Yeah. Again, looking at it, it hurts me. Just the RPI system and how much that's actually impacting people's not only seeding, but impacting whether or not people get into the tournament or not, and taking teams who are more deserving and, their RPI starts with a 7. Let's not even consider them. When you look at how they've done compared to how DBU has done, and they would deserve it more than Dallas Baptist. Yeah. So I think they're in just because I don't think the committee will leave out someone with an RPI that high. But I think there are other teams in their own conference that would deserve it more than they do.
I'm worried that the committee is a lot of, box score checkers. They don't watch games like a lot of us do. I feel like there's an eye test that needs to be taken into account here with a lot of these teams this year. The RPI seems to have failed us up and down, in my opinion. I really don't see they have to figure out this system because teams canceling games and not playing people because their RPI will go down. They can put that much weight in the RPI seems silly to me. Wins and losses should matter.
I can't believe we're even talking about a team out of the Missouri Valley that, was 2 games over 500. It's really ludicrous, and it kind of does show kind of the fallacies of the RPI. Yeah, they played a lot of tough teams, but again, a Tuesday midweek in College Station isn't anywhere near a weekend series with A&M by any stretch of the imagination. Outside of that Southern Miss sweep, you look up and down their schedule, and it really isn't that inspiring, at all. I mean, you're really gonna say 2 of 3 against Maryland in March is gonna be the one that you're gonna put them in the tournament. They had some horrible losses down the stretch. They lost 2 of 3 to actually 0-2-1 against Indiana State. Indiana State's I think they're in a 200 range for RPI. So it's almost crazy that we're even talking about DBU. And the flip side of that is a lot of projections don't have SIU, the team who won the division by 3 games, even in the tournament. That's the crazier part to me.
Southern Illinois deserves to be in. And this isn't just because my mom went there. Southern Illinois, they won they handily won their conference. We talk about Maryland barely won a bad conference. Southern Illinois handily won their conference. Why are we putting in a Dallas Baptist team that wasn't even really competing for the conference championship the entire year? Just because of one number says they should be in? What about the record?
They played a bunch of midweek games that were really, really strong. So they're almost like an anti-good team because the RPI gets raised up by scheduling all these great midweek teams.
Well, and they didn't even win them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
We lose to really good teams, and then we also lose in conference. But because we played the really good teams, let's get a boost.
Yeah, we lose to good teams. And then when we lose on weekends, it doesn't matter. That's just silly to me. I'm over it. There's no way that SIU or SIL should be that far down. It blows me up my mind. I am so over RPI. I hate it. I think that it's ruining college baseball. They need to fix the system. Fix the system.
And then I got one more note. We got a winner take all tomorrow. Army, Bucknell. Army stole game 1, came back to beat Bucknell, and then Bucknell blew them out today. Y'all going against the troops today, or who y'all got tomorrow?
I want Army to win that game. I think that it's a better story. I want to see Army. I have a feeling that if Army wins that game, they could be coming to Corvallis, which would be just outstanding. I would definitely be rooting for that game. I might even take my uncle who's currently serving. I hope Army wins. It's a Patriot League, for heaven's sake. So let's go. I'm going Army.
Yeah, I mean, I played travel ball with someone who pitched at Bucknell back in the day, but I haven't talked to him in 4 or 5 years. Go Army.
I'm rolling with the Knights too. We got a clean sweep. Even Noah was on the Black Knights in our little pick that's coming out.
I love it. I hope they win that one. I mean, it's a good series. Bucknell's a very good team also, so they're both deserving of that, which is going to be probably a 4 seed somewhere, but they both deserve to get in that tournament.
Yeah, and then Air Force is kind of playing up too, so wouldn't that be crazy if we had 2 Service Academy teams in the tournament?
They got to beat UNLV and Nevada. I don't know if they can do that. They got to beat UNLV and Nevada, and both those teams are pretty good, so I don't know. That's going to be tough.
Doable. I trust them.
It's the troops. You can't root against the troops.
It's always fun to have service teams in there. Not going to lie. It's great.
I want to know. I need to look up the stat. How many walks the Air Force hitters have? Because your eyesight to go to Air Force has to be incredible.
That's so good. Yeah.
Or their home runs, because their elevation. I think they play at the highest ballpark in all of college baseball up in those mountains. So that's going to be even a crazier stat, is kind of how good their home runs are.
Yeah. It's a beautiful ballpark.
Gorgeous ballpark. Them and BYU, if you've never been to a game at BYU, that is something else to take in. Watch that home team play. My goodness, that is a gorgeous stadium. Oh, do we got anything else, boys?
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Jake, I have to send you my picks. Do I send you my picks or I just send Alex my picks?
Just send them to me. I'll create some kind of graphic.
I haven't sent them in yet either, so we'll get after that. As always, go Beavs. I haven't got to watch the score yet. Hopefully they're winning right now. I haven't checked, but got my Marvin shirt on from Belligerent Beavs. So go Beavs. Jake, AJ, great show as always.
Got kegs and eggs with the Ags tomorrow, so get up, get loud, set the alarm. We're going to be ready to go because they canceled it, unfortunately.
I have no hope in the SEC tournament actually happening anymore.
I think it goes to single elimination, unfortunately, but hey, I hope it keeps going. So good show, guys. We'll see you guys on Saturday. We'll be back, bring more baseball coverage.
Yes,
Saturday.